friends. Hello, and welcome back to another bonus episode of the Business Unicorns podcast. Pete, I'm going to ask you how you were doing as if we weren't just speaking before I hit the record button. How are you doing, Pete?
I'll give you a different answer than I did the
Okay,
first time.
great.
I'm great, mostly because we seem to talk only on Friday mornings, and I think we're all in better moods on Fridays.
Yeah.
So I'm doing very well, and it's the summer, and tonight I'm going to sit on my deck and watch my kids run around in the backyard, my
Ah,
wife, and two big thumbs up.
that sounds delightful. Yes. Well, great. All right,
I know
sir.
that's a different answer than I gave you before as well. How are
I
you doing, Mark?
I am doing okay. I was telling Pete before, dear listeners, I've been a little bit of a cranky mood lately. There's been like a lot going on with the old pandemic here, but all in all, I'm very good. And my kind of happy thought is I'm gearing up to take a few weeks off and go, in theory, if the gods of COVID allow, head off to Greece, and then ideally head to Berlin for a weekend. So listeners, if
I
you're
would
in
like to
Greece or
say
Berlin, let me know. Even
I
though,
want the whole audience to know how important this is. Like, just take
yes,
time off. And none of us do enough of it. You definitely don't do enough of it. But I remember I spent a couple days with you when you were fresh off of Berlin a couple summers ago, and
yes,
you were your best self at that
yes,
moment. And
yes,
so people need to do a lot of that stuff if they
yeah.
can.
Well, I will say this, listeners. In the old world, I actually think I was great at taking time. I was taking a lot of time off for several years. Lately, the business has required a little bit more of me, which I do not mind. And listen, I love my job, and this is the way business is. You have these kinds of ebbs and flows, and part of why it's required so much is there's been, even though certainly some challenges related to this overall, as I have not made a secret of, more excitement for me personally than I've had about MFF in several years, because we were able to restructure the business in a lot of, I think, very positive ways that are really setting up for a lot more growth, just a lot more interesting opportunities that has me really, really, really excited. But as happens, as anybody knows, running a business, there are downsides sometimes when you love what you're doing so much. Sometimes it's hard to turn off. And while I can't say that none of my inability to turn off has been related to some anxiety about wanting to make sure we really stick this landing and we have a great fall and we really do this best as we re-enter back into a slightly more normal world, part of it is I just see a lot of excitement and fun and potential. I'm thrilled with this current iteration of the MFF team. I think we're working very well together, and that has made me get back into a useful, obsessive mode that, frankly, it's been a couple years since I felt, but it can take a toll. And so that's your first takeaway, leaders. If you're feeling a similar feeling, perhaps you too should join me in Greece and Berlin. I'll see you there. All right, friends, we're going to dig into some more content here, because that's not the only pro tip today. We wanted to cover something that came up a lot in the Instagram questions that Pete and I had put out. And then another topic that came up a lot in an email I just put out yesterday as of time of this recording, which was, what is the number one struggle in your business? And they happen to be related. The topic that came up a number of times, as careful listeners remember, was onboarding. So we want to give you a little more of a deep dive. But what precedes onboarding, of course, is finding the right people. And a topic that came up multiple times in responses to yesterday's email request to let me know what you need help with was finding people. How do we find people? Right now, we all know that this is not the easiest environment in the history of the world to find employees. There are all sorts of conjectures to why that is, but nonetheless, the impact is it's difficult. And frankly, we all know when you're running a training gym, it's always difficult. It's never easy to find the people that you want to work with that are a good fit for your culture, that have a sufficient amount of skills for however you're set up, that are going to be able to work for the amount of money that you can pay for this role while still allowing you margin. It's not an easy thing. So we thought we would cover those two topics. And yeah, anything else you want to add, Pete, before we dive into, I could give them a bunch of rapid fire ways to find people.
I love this topic. It's a little overwhelming. All I want to say is that this stresses us out just like it does the readers.
Sure.
And it's a burden that we're all under all the time. And
Yes.
for example, right now, I'm trying to hire new office managers in not one, but both of our facilities. And so it is a uphill climb, but I'm learning a lot in the moment. And I do have a lot of ideas, as do you, as I know that you'll reel off 10 or 12 that will surprise me that I didn't even think about. So let's do it. Let's hit it.
Hurrah. All right. Well, first, I'm going to give you a rundown of a bunch of actionable strategies for what can you do to find potential trainers. Now, I'm going to list pretty much everything I can think of. And certainly if you listen to this and you're like, oh, you forgot this, you dumb, I'll be like, number one, please don't call me a dumb. And number two, what are those other things? Because I'll be happy to share with our listeners and readers. So some things to do. And admittedly, these are going to be more or less helpful depending on your market. First of all, putting up job ads. They're not the main thing. They're probably not my number one go-to thing, but you might as well do it. At Mark Fisher Fitness, we've been having the most success with Indeed and ZipRecruiter. Again, it may or may not be relevant for your market. If you do this, I do think it's worth considering paying a little bit so the ad really gets seen by the types of individuals you're looking to hire. I also think it's worth considering doing a little bit of a study into what makes a good job description. What makes a good job description so that your ad is likely to pop. Another thing you can do is proactively targeting potential future coaches among your current clients. This is the classic training gym strategy. It works very, very well. As a general rule, for most of our businesses, we usually are going to want to be hiring personality and talent over skill for a number of reasons I won't bore you with. I think most of you know them, but yeah, it's definitely you want to hire the person. And oftentimes potential coaches can come from your current clients. So many training gyms, this is their go-to place for finding future trainers. You can also create a job description. This is one of my favorite ones I don't hear enough. Consider creating a job description that's specifically for your clients to share with people who they know could be a fit, and consider offering a bonus, a referral bonus to your clients if you either hire someone they refer, or potentially even a bonus for even giving you leads of people that they might refer. This can be communicated via email, via social media posts in your private Facebook groups. You can do announcements. You can do physical postings in your training gyms. And I think the thing to understand here is this is a very specific type of sales copy. You want to be very clear on what it is, the benefit to them. You want to sell them on why this matters to them, why they should be invested in finding great staff for your facility. You want to identify the values, the behaviors, the type of person you're looking to hire. And then I think it's appropriate to have some preferred skills, which would be great, because certainly depending on how much lead time you have, the sweet spot to my mind, oftentimes when I'm looking to hire a trainer, the dream is usually like 1 to 2 to maybe 3 years, right? That's not to say that I won't hire someone with more experience or won't hire someone with less, but at that point, usually they've got their feet under them. They're not too green, but they're still very, very moldable. Now with this particular strategy, you might find an individual, maybe a younger individual that has a lot of passion that your client thinks could be a great fit for your culture, but maybe they don't have a training certification yet. Well, ideally, this individual you want to get into your funnel. And the strategy here that can be helpful if you can swing it, as I've discussed in previous podcasts, is certainly pay for them to do a trial and then maybe pay for them to be a member for a few months and see the way it works out. But the key thing is you're going to want to keep all of these prospects going, all of these funnels happening all at once. Some other things, I'll give you rapid fire here because I want Pete to jump in too. Building relationships with local colleges is a great thing to do. Certainly, if there are exercise science degrees, that is awesome. And depending on your model and your market, if you can set up an internship program, Pete tells us that's a very good idea. Maybe he'll have more to share on that. You want to network with fitness professionals in your area. So this is, again, going to be a little more useful if you're in an urban market, but regardless, if it's possible to develop connections with fitness professionals in your area, not only for individuals that might be future trainers for you, but for individuals that might know other people that could become future trainers. Anybody that is a super nerd, I'm sure we have all read the various books on that discuss how oftentimes people find jobs through loose ties. It's usually not through the first contact. You don't necessarily hire the person that you know personally, but the person that knows the person that you know personally. So other things you can consider doing to expedite this and get more juice out of this particular fruit is to consider hosting a Facebook group for fitness professionals in your geographic area. Consider hosting events at your facility. That could just be pure networking events, or maybe hosting certifications just for the purpose of, you're also going to be able to educate your staff, but potentially for meeting other individuals in your area. Consider inviting local trainers to come to team trainings and team meetings if there's somebody you think could be viable for the team at some point. You should also be posting, obviously, on your public social media channels when you're looking. You should post in the private Facebook groups that you are involved in, that there might be, again, either somebody in there that could be an employee or know somebody that could be a good fit. You want to go ahead and post on job boards for all the trainer certifications, even though in practice, frankly, that I haven't seen that get a lot of traction, but it can't hurt, right? We're pulling over all the rocks here. And then, of course, we alluded to this a little bit before, but I think sending a dedicated email or 2 or 3 to your email list is another way to make sure you're getting the word out. Just make sure when you're doing that, certainly you can say you're putting out a call for potential employees, but you also want to potentially include this sales that I spoke of before, where you're pitching your clients and offering them an ethical bribe to find you leads and or future employees. So that was a lot of things. My hope is I gave you 1 or 2 maybe new things you weren't thinking about doing. And my final thought I'll share before I allow Pete to chime in here is this is not unlike any approach to marketing. It's a little bit different, however, in that, frankly, depending on where your gym is, you might be able to just lean heavily on paid digital and do okay. However, that might work. You might be able to just put one pull in the water, maybe a single email blast to your clients will do the trick and you'll find the person you're looking for, but it's going to require a lot more luck because this isn't a volume play. You are looking for a lot of leads. So in that sense, it's similar to marketing, but ultimately you're not looking for 150, 200 training gym clients. You're looking for one very special kind of high ticket client. And that's someone that fits the criteria that we mentioned before I rattled off all those ways you can find employees for your team. Pete, what do you got? Anything you want to share? Anything you would add? Any observations?
Well, you just said all the things. And first, I have a question for you. Was that a list or did you just do that straight off the top of your head?
No, that was definitely a list because, dear listeners and readers, I will always respond when you email me. So when I send out an email asking for content ideas, I make it clear I'm looking for content ideas, but I will invariably respond and help you if at all possible. So as it happened throughout the day, because so many people asked that question, I kept developing and refining this list, and that's where that came from. So no, okay. Not off the top of my head.
Because that was a mind-blowing freestyle if it wasn't a list.
Okay.
You hit many of the bullet points I wanted to. So allow me to reinforce, double down, or build off of a couple of things that you said that I think were of particular importance. First, I love the idea of looking inside of your existing community, existing clients, as a great place for help. We do that routinely, or I should say a lot of our clients self-select into our internship program. So it's very common, especially with these athletes where the dream is kind of starting to get extinguished and they realize the writing's on the wall. I might not ever get a paycheck for playing the sport I play. And that's definitely not the end of the world, but as a huge compliment to who we are and what we do, it's very, very common for them to raise their hand and say, but I love this. This is something that lights me up. What if we were to explore this a little further? Would you ever entertain the idea of putting a client athlete into your internship program? And the answer is always yes, hell yes. But they think they're asking us some sort of a big favor. I love this. They end up being good coaches. They've already proven themselves to be a fit, and they're lacking in the competency place to a certain degree. But at the same time, I'm love to say that our clients, the most dedicated lifers, pride themselves on being able to be like almost entry-level coaches in our gym. When the place is busy and they see somebody wandering around looking a little lost, like I need to find a coach, it's not at all uncommon to see one of the real regulars be like, hey, I got you. Come on over here. I'll show you how to do that med ball variation. And that's how we know who the people are, who we could put a call into if we were a little shorthanded, or if we have an eye on someone who could jump into an internship program if it seems that they're about to hang up the cleats. That's exactly what we do. I think it's also worthy of note that these often make the best admins. We've had some really great success from long-term clients because they just fully understand the way the place works.
Right.
They like, who can better articulate how to navigate our training space than someone who's been doing it forever.
Sure.
Sorry, I'm going to clear my cat away from the screen because he's trying to come back in. When I bring somebody in who has either interned with us or trained with us for an extended period for a role like the front desk office manager type deal, what I find is that they can sell very effectively, very quickly, because they're more or less talking to a peer in their mind.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is what I've been doing for the last several months or years. This is how the place works. And it streamlines kind of the onboarding process pretty dramatically. And it's been successful for us. It continues to right now. I did mention we are actively looking to hire office managers, and we are having varying degrees of success. We're earlier in the game with our Florida facility than we are with Massachusetts, because our kind of Hall of Fame office manager, Julie, has just recently left. She's a week removed from leaving. And I think we're close. Like today, I'm going to make an offer. And I think we found someone. And we did it by having a lot of lines out there, like a lot of lines. There are job postings out there. There are Instagram posts. There are references in our Instagram stories. There are emails out to existing clients. There are requests in our community Facebook group. You just can't get so singularly focused on this that you're going to live and die by Indeed. And so ultimately, what I have found with the candidate that we're getting close with, it was the law of repeated exposure. She saw it in 2, 3, 4 different places. And finally she was kind of like, I relent. I'm going to reach out and just see what this is about, and realize, well, this is more of, it's maybe closer to a career than just a job than she thought when she was able to get on the phone with us and talk to us about it. And we wouldn't have got there had I stopped at just a Facebook post or something like that. So
just like marketing, they have to see it more than once.
It really is. It's all marketing. So that has been successful for me, and it is, well, I hope it's successful. I'll tell you the next time we jump on a call. Beyond that, I want to touch on the fact that I think I have made this mistake a lot, and a lot of gym owners make the mistake, and it is we treat the hiring process, the staff building process, as a reactive activity and not a proactive one. And so if you are caught off guard by an employee defection and you haven't done anything to kind of make it clear that you're constantly evaluating talent, then you're going to compromise on your hiring rules and kind of the code that you live by, because eventually you're just like, I need a warm body. Let's do this. And so we talked on our last call about how you build the bench, and you're kind of looking at potential talent. Beyond that, I think that the best way that we can generate opportunity on this front is by leveraging the rule of reciprocity, where I'm constantly reaching out to other gym owners and saying, hey, I got an intern from your area who's about to go home. Do you have any work? I got a great coach here. That's awesome. I'm reaching out to gym owners constantly, just saying, I want to place every intern whoever leaves my gym. And so yesterday, I made an introduction to a gym owner in Colorado for an intern who's about to move out there. I introduced an intern to 2 Unicorn Society members looking at work in both the United States and Canada, that I'd say, this is the person, I will vouch for them. And I know that eventually what goes around will come around. And those people are going to know someone who says, I'm moving to the Boston area, or I'm going to be in Southeast Florida. I got to find work. And they're going to reach out to me and they're going to say, hey, you've known me for a while. You respect my ability to evaluate talent, I believe. I've got this person you should look at. And you just never know when that is going to come back at you. But I find that the best way to do it is by constantly just jabbing with value to other people, and they're going to throw it back at you eventually. That's how it's worked for us so far.
Love it. Love it. One thing I have often said, semi-jokingly, but not really jokingly, going back to your point about finding clients from your client, or finding trainers from your clientele base who reach out about potentially working with you, is this is a joking KPI. I love my joking KPIs. Is ideally 1 to 2% of your clients should decide they want to become fitness professionals.
I like that.
I made that up. But here's what I think. I think if you're doing a truly great job, a meaningful percentage of your clients will decide, I love this so much, I want to do this professionally. Now, they may or may not be the right fit for your facility, your culture. They may or may not really want to do that because, of course, the fitness industry is not without its challenges. And sometimes as a client, one can underweight the less savory aspects of being a fitness professional. But I do think there's something to be said for, it's a good sign if the people you're working with decide, I think I might want to do this too, because you've inspired them with your modeling. One thing I want to say quickly before we transition into onboarding, which is a pro tip that I got from Pete. So Pete, maybe you can share this. You mentioned you have one particular strategy you use when you're vetting the billions of applications you get for your internship. Would you like to share that with our listeners?
Are you talking about the tripwires I've built?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So there were a couple years back, 5, 6, 7 years ago, before every gym on the planet declared that they had an internship, and there was a smaller intern opportunity pool with the same size candidate pool. And so I tended to find myself buried in intern leads, like sometimes in the vicinity of 125 to 150 candidates for 6 spots in the summer. And that time has passed a little bit. So I don't lean quite so heavily on the tripwires anymore, but they are very important. And basically, back then, I needed a way to turn 140, let's say, applications into 40 very quickly. And the best way I found to do it was to just make this a game of professionalism and attention to detail. And so what we said, well, one, if you wanted details on our internship, you typically started by looking at the internship page on our website. And then there were just a series of very basic steps to follow to get there. So it would be, please reach out to Pete and request that a copy of the internship be sent to you, or internship application be sent to you. They email, and the evaluation process starts from that second. Because if the, extend a request to Pete to send it comes in as, hey, Eric, send me an application. No, please, no, thank you, no punctuation, no grammar. That person always gets an application, but they've started being evaluated from that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the application that they receive has some very manageable but specific steps. Please fill out the attached form and return it along with a updated resume and a under 500 word cover letter or essay explaining why this fits into your career path and what you hope to take away from it, and submit all three in a single PDF document. And yes, I realize that that isn't instant, easy knowledge for everybody, but it's also not that difficult to figure
out. It's pretty
out.
Googleable.
And when I put it in there, I actually have now gotten to a point where it goes in increased font size, bold, italic, underlined, red font. Now, it basically screams, this is the only part that is important to me in this how to apply process. And what I found was, you're going to be so disappointed when you hear this statistic if I haven't hit you before.
Oh, no.
The first 100 plus candidate summer that we did this, 38% of the candidates successfully followed the rules. So if I had 100 of them, 62 of them failed to submit all in a single document. Now, a lot of good candidates fell by the wayside there. I'm sure of it, because quite frankly, when I was so buried and inundated and needed to figure out how to become more operationally efficient in my internship process, I didn't read those applications. And that's kind of the way the world works. That's the way the corporate world works. That's the way job hunting works, is you fail to check a box, you quite literally are likely to miss an opportunity. And so I have had that in place since. It's helped me really lock down early identification of a lack of attention to detail. And people might not take the fitness industry that seriously, but you need to take attention to detail seriously in our space, because we deal with sometimes complex injury histories or complex scenarios that clients bring to us. And just being the person who, fires off the email that says like LOL, TTYL, Mark, and you're just like, I don't know what to make of this candidate.
Yeah.
And so I tried to introduce a very baseline degree of professionalism into the process, and it helped me a lot. It's helped me be very judgmental of my candidates. But the tripwires matter, man. I mean, we need detail-oriented coaches.
Yeah, no, it's true. And the application of that we have used, where I directly stole this idea from Pete, is specifically important in the Indeed, ZipRecruiter, any mass job website, which again is not going to be everywhere in the world. But if you're in New York, I suspect in a lot of big cities, you can actually get a lot of applications, and it can help you sort them very quickly by putting in a tripwire or even just like a little bit of an extra loop, because a lot of people are going through those sites and they're just spray firing. I assume they're just pressing buttons to apply to all the things. And what I basically do is I will always respond, and I'll basically say, here's the next step for consideration is you need to email me, Mark Fisher Fitness, go look at our website, and then send me a 60-second video explaining why you would like to work at Mark Fisher Fitness. And that gets rid of most of the people. And our business, even for people that are not front of house or quote unquote back of house, being able to be personally engaging is a big piece of what we do. And I have found that saves more time because I can quickly, first of all, many candidates won't go to that extra step, which is fine. And second of all, I can quickly see in 60 seconds rather than doing a painful 10 to 15 minute phone screen, this individual is just not going to be the right fit. And I highly recommend it for that reason. All right.
Mark, if you think about it, I just want to quickly mention this gives me a little bit of like PTSD going back to the college application process. You remember, I know, I don't know if this is the case anymore, but I know that you and I applied to colleges at roughly the same stage in the world. And I just remember saying to people like, where do you apply? They're like, oh, I applied here and here. And you know what? I'll probably apply to like these 6 because they're all Common App, which is code for like, I'm just going to throw that generic garbage that I put together out to those schools. And I remember people complaining like, oh, the application process, that school's not a Common App school. Forget that one. And now in hindsight, I realize if you follow the Common App route, you end up with generic submissions because they just change the name of the school. They change the name of the, they don't modify their application. They don't modify their essay to reflect why their interests align with what that school is known for academically.
Yes.
And if you create kind of an application process from a job perspective that's like that, the mainstream, Indeed, like let's just spam every gym that I see a place hiring the
Dear
same
sirs
exact stuff.
or madams.
Exactly. To whom
I
it
would
may
like to work
concern.
at your glitter unicorn gym, please. May
Exactly.
it so be considered. Okay, not fit. Gotta go.
So the tripwires are back, or will be here forever with us. And
Yes.
I wouldn't say our application process is complex or extraordinarily detailed to a fault. It's just enough in my mind.
Yeah, indeed. That's what we're always looking for with systems. All right, friends. So we do want to take a little bit of time and unpack onboarding here, and we'll do this, I suppose, as concise as we can. I'm going to let Pete offer a lot of thoughts here because the way they structure their internship is not dissimilar to the way probably we would all benefit from structure our onboarding. I will give you one high-level pro tip for those of you that are for the first time looking to think about this. This is always the way I suggest people start. Identify how many hours you have for this individual's onboarding. This is great. If you're a training gym, it's likely anywhere the actual hours of them doing things that you're paying them money before they can be on the floor. You're probably looking at somewhere between 20 to 80 hours of some type of onboarding or training. Now, ideally, there is potentially some shadowing or auditing beforehand. As I mentioned, I think it's best if you're going to hire somebody new to your model that's not a client, that they at least do a trial and then ideally a couple months of training for which you would pay because you're helping prepare them to be part of it. Ideally, they continue to train as a client in your facility for several months, which again is absolutely necessary if they are new to your model and to your facility. But if you're the typical training gym owner and you're the person doing the training, which for smaller places is almost always the case, what you want to do is figure out how many hours. Hopefully it's 40, hopefully it's 80, but somewhere in there. And it's so many hours. That's great. And the next thing you need to do is make a list of what are the things that need to happen. You'll probably need to do some human resources stuff. You will probably need to do some training of how they actually do the job. That could be further subdivided between, depending on how your model is run. Is there a program design module and standards you have to teach? Is it the facilitation of the sessions? Are there some further follow-up modules on the technical standards for the main core lifts that you use in your facility? Are there other things they need to know as an employee? It will not surprise literally no one if you come to MFF. There's 2 different 90-minute culture onboarding sessions that I do with individuals. So we started with X many hours. Then we have the list of the things that need to happen. And then you need to spice out the pie. So based on how long or how complicated each of those trainings need to be, you then essentially assign them times, how long it's going to be. And then for the fourth and final step, you then assemble that into a schedule. Because particularly when you're onboarding people, they want to get it right. And this is something that took me a long time to understand because I have a rage for freedom and independence. I'm an entrepreneur. However, understand even people that are driven by autonomy and want a very, very loose leash. In the very beginning, what they most want is to know what winning looks like. What they most want is to know what winning looks like. So in my experience, it's very important to give hew maybe towards a little bit more structure than middle of the road in the beginning. So they really feel like they've got some tactile feedback from the onboarding structure and they know exactly what needs to happen, when it needs to happen. Because let's remember, continuing our metaphor, if recruiting and finding people is essentially akin to marketing, onboarding a new team member is akin to onboarding a new client, where so much of that first day, that first experience, what do you do when they come in? Is there something special for them? Can you have a gift for them? Can you do things to really wow them and over deliver in the very beginning to set the tone for hopefully what will be a fruitful professional relationship? So I admit that it's very, very high level. Pete, what would you share? What would you tell people to consider if they need some thoughts for successful onboarding?
Well, it seems that it's easy for people to say, well, yeah, you've got an internship program. You can't really relate to my struggles. But everything you just said was a description of a 12-week internship with us, if
Sure.
you really back it out. So you can kind of think of my internship program as onboarding, say, a half dozen coaches, and then firing 5 of them on the last day, as kind of where one of them happens to stay on board. Now, we don't
Very
promise
harsh.
employment. We don't, but if you really think about it, it is just onboarding
Yeah.
for an extended
Yeah.
period. Because what we do is our goal, and we say this to every intern, is we want 100% of you to be employable on the last day of your internship. There's absolutely no guarantee that we have work for you, but we want you to be so good that we want to go to war for finding you work. And we won't do that if you're going to go out into the industry and make us look bad. So here we go. Let's reverse engineer what an employable coach would look like for us 12 weeks from today. I say 12 weeks because that's the duration of our summer internship, which is the shortest of the 3. And so we basically said, all right, these are the confines, the tightest window of time that we need to get somebody from point A to point B, and point B being somebody who could theoretically join our payroll in a full-time format. And then in the fall, we have a little bit more than those 12 weeks. In the spring, we've got considerably more, like 20 weeks of material in like the longest case scenario. But basically, our core curriculum is weeks 1 to 12, and everything that happens after that is a want and not a need, but it's still good stuff if you can be there in the spring. And we just ask ourselves, what's the perfect coach look like on day 7 of week 12 of the internship, and then we build backwards. And it's exactly all of the things you just mentioned. It starts with an orientation where we just start with the basic rules around here, the how we do things piece. And on that day, it's almost more important that we outline the what is not acceptable than the here we do things. And we get really ahead of the kind of pet peeves component.
Yeah.
Let's just make sure that this doesn't happen, and this doesn't happen. And otherwise, you're within the guardrails, and any mistakes you make are on us first. And we, as long as they don't break the basics, we don't need you swearing on social media while shirtless, ripping off chin ups in our gym. There are certain basics, like they sign a social media policy.
That's actually what we require them to do, is to do lots of cursing and shirtless pull-ups.
Yep. And so we are, which is why I didn't hire Roger Lawson, and I mandated that he work for you.
Well, Raj doesn't curse that much.
No, he's not. I don't think of him as being someone. But the point is,
he's the best.
I don't know that Roger would be employable in our space, not because he's inappropriate. I think he just wouldn't be interested. Whereas there was a day when I said to him, whatever it takes, just pack up your stuff and go. Go to Mark's place, stand on his front steps, and tell him that you're going to work for him now, whether he's asked or not, because he is a fit.
I appreciate that. There is a 0% chance he's going to listen to this. So I'll make a note to let him know we were raving about our shared love for him.
That's a good point. But when Roger left, he did check the box of employable from a competency standpoint. Yeah. And so he might not have been like the perfect fit for the baseball culture, but I knew that he would be a cultural gold mine in the right setting. And so that's the point. If we were in a tight spot, yeah, he could definitely work for us and been a great coach on the training floor. But would he have felt fulfilled? No, he wouldn't like our space. It's not MFF. But the point is that he was ready, technically on paper, he was good to go. And we needed to build toward that. And it's so much more comprehensive today than it was back then. I mean, John O'Neill, who designs our internship program, has put more hours into it than anyone on the planet. And the thing that I would encourage people to keep in mind that I learned from John constantly is that this is not a static concept. Once you've found something more than that messy first draft where you're like, this is our onboarding, here it is. It
Right.
constantly needs to be reevaluated. During the week before onboarding new interns every single season, John and I will have a period of time where we open up the orientation paperwork and we look at it and we're like, what in here is stupid? What does not have any relevance at this point? Why do we have old staff members' names in this document with contact info that they get, where they get cell phone numbers and email addresses? And what have we phased out? What have we brought in? What do we need to change? This means at least 3 times a year we thoroughly reevaluate our onboarding and we change it. I've never seen it not get changed in all of the years that we've been doing that. So as you think about onboarding, think about it as being just a constantly moving and ever changing, just like your business and your community. It needs to shift with the dynamics of the operation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And as we always love to say, the last step of any system is to audit the system and make it better. I will offer maybe one final thought here, because I think we're sadly nearing our time, gentle listener, which is that for those of you that are in a training gym and you have a slightly more traditional, let's call it 20 to 80 hours over, let's call it 2 to 4 weeks official onboarding process, your gentle reminder is that onboarding should be at least 90 days, at least 3 months. So even if the individual, let's talk about, there's some bizarre scenario where the individual gets on the floor very quickly, right? So maybe the third week they're on the floor. Seems unreasonable, but maybe you have a simple model, you can pull it off. Well, you're not done, friend. You're not done with your onboarding. This was another thing that I think we didn't do as well as we could have in the old world. We would, and I don't mean pre-COVID, I mean older world, because I think we've been doing this better for several years. But once the individual's on the floor, that's not the end of the onboarding. In some ways, that's just the beginning of the next phase of onboarding. And you generally will be served by considering their first at least 90 days, but maybe onboarding plus the first 90 days on the floor as their official onboarding process, because you will want to do continual ongoing training. And that can look like a lot of different things, but it might look like a weekly meeting with you and or your training manager for an hour to discuss how things are going. You're also going to need to review and probably repeat a number of the trainings, because at the beginning, their brain is only going to be able to hold so much. And we talk about this topic a lot here in the podcast. I don't have the time to do it justice, but understanding adult learning and getting very clear on, here's what the expectation is. You will be expected to know this by the end of this training today. By this date, you'll be able to know this. Here is what performance looks like. Here is how it is measured. Here are the rewards and consequences. That kind of stuff isn't done after they're on the floor. And I think being very intentional about taking the first maybe 90 days that they're on the floor and continuing to train them, even redoing some of those modules, doing those modules again after they have more of a schema or web of knowledge, if you call it, if you're a real asshole like I am, that is going to be very, very helpful and important. And then at the end of the 90-day, I would encourage you to have a final meeting with them, an offboarding of the onboarding, so to speak, where certainly you can continue to give any final pertinent performance feedback before they begin to live a life of a non-being onboarded as a regular quote unquote trainer. And importantly, so you get feedback from them about how to improve the onboarding, because you're particularly looking for what were the things that surprised you that you didn't feel you were prepared for? What suggestions do you have to improve the onboarding process? Because to Pete's point, ideally, every time you do this is another opportunity to sharpen the saw. And let me also let you off the hook here emotionally for those of you that are obsessive completionists. You'll never be done. The good news is you're never going to get it wrong, but the bad news is you're never going to get it done.
Can I give one closing thought?
Please.
So I know that there are a lot of listeners who are going to say, well, Pete, it's stupid to think that any of us have 12 weeks to onboard anybody. You live in a little fantasy land. This isn't reality. Let's talk about real stuff. And what I will tell you is that we have as many as like 30 to 35 interns every single year who check all these boxes, complete the program, and go off into the field. And I would love to find 30 to 35 great employment opportunities for those people, because those are people who I am sending out to other employers and saying, hey, we checked a ton of boxes for you. good news. This person actually can be on the training floor in week 3 with you, as Mark said. We've done that work. They put in so many hours. They work their ass off for that, right? Now I want to help place them. But the thing that is happening most often to me, and has been for almost 15 years now, is people come to me and they say, I want to hire one of your former interns. And I say, all right, tell me the details. And they're like, well, I've got 10 to 15 hours for them to start, and it could be full-time at some point. And as I found myself saying a lot lately, part-time opportunities get you part-time talent. And we are churning out coaches who they've put in 300 to 500 hours honing their craft and investing in themselves, because they're not making money with us. These are unpaid interns, and they've relocated themselves. They've rented housing. They have busted their ass. They have deserved every referral I can give them for a role. And at that point, they're not going to relocate for 12 to 15 hours of work that might be 40. And so I understand it's hard to find a full-time worth of wage, but I will tell you that I've got a lot of good coaches that I would love to dump into the hands of good potential employers who say, I have an actual full-time role. And so if you are a gym owner who is ready to fill a hole in your team, and you have 30 to 40 hours a week of work for someone, and aka a career and not a job, then I have people that I want to funnel toward you. But every time you reach out to an internship program, or you reach out to Mike Boyle and say, I want to hire one of your interns, or to Exos, or to the Cosgroves, and you bring to them something that's kind of just a piece of a job, they don't have a lot of wiggle room to convince their people to uproot their life to come do that. So just scrape and claw to get to a point where you're looking to fill full-time opportunities. And there are people out there who are not going to need to be onboarded for as many as 90 days. It doesn't take 90 days to learn the rules. It takes 90 days to go from like very, very, very green coach to competent coach, we'll say. And I'm handing you competent coaches. They're green within your systems and your culture. And that can be accelerated a little bit. I know it's a little bit of a rant, and I also know that it's kind of fantasy land to tell everybody, you got 40 hours a week to give away to everybody. But just understand that, like, that's the pie in the sky. I say this to my team all the time. When we need to make a hire, when we're a 4 full-time strength coach gym, but I know that we have 4.5 type need, I go to the team and I say, we need a half employee. We've got 20 hours a week to fill, basically. It's usually more from like a program design standpoint. And I say, you guys get 2 options. I'm either going to allow you to say to me, hey, Pete, hire a former intern to pick up 20 hours a week who lives locally, who that's not disrupting their life, and give them part-time work, and we'll make it work. But that's going to kind of disrupt the culture, the thing you guys have created, because that person's probably going to go at some point, and we might replace them when we're out. Say, or you can all voluntarily add a little bit to your to-do list. Collectively, 4 people will do 4.5 people's work, and I will allow you to handpick the person that becomes that 5th full-time staff member as soon as we're ready for it. They have never once opted for the former scenario. Every single time they say, no, we worked too hard to create this staff dynamic. We're all ready to stretch a little bit right now. And every single time I've asked, they do it. And when everybody's feeling a little stretched thin, they know they're doing it on their terms, and I'm not the bad guy. And so if maybe you could apply that mindset in your space, if you've got almost enough team, not quite enough, but you say to them, hey, you're going to have a much better work dynamic, work community if we all kind of get our butts kicked a little bit for a little while here while we scrape and claw to get a full-time role worth of opportunity to fill. And then you guys are going to do it. Like when I said to you, I'm close on hiring an office manager, we got off the phone and John and I were like, oh shit, that's the one. Like we got to hire her. But then we were like, well, all right, it's time. And we walked out into the gym. And we walked to the pitching coach and we said, hey, we think we've got the one. Would you like to interview her? We walk over to Ethan. I think I found the one. Would you like to have a conversation with her? Hey, Josh, would you like to have a conversation with her? Eric, would you like to have a conversation with her? And they all feel seen and heard, but they feel like they're picking their colleagues, not me assigning them.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
That's a great point. And sadly, we're at time here. So I'm going to leave you hanging with a little cliffhanger, our gentle listeners. Perhaps the next time Pete and I get together, what's interesting is we discussed onboarding and we discussed finding prospects, but you're already alluding to some, I think, important pieces of once you have your prospects, how do you choose who you're going to hire and onboard? And that is another thing that I'm sure we'll have helpful thoughts on a future date. But in the meantime, listeners, thank you so much for listening to us. Please like and subscribe, do all the things. If you want to click on the link below, you can check out more about business coaching or our coaching group, the Unicorn Society, which you can submit early consideration for the waitlist for next enrollment period in January. But until then, we appreciate it a great deal. Pete, anything else you want to share with our listeners before we go?
Just thank you. And when we come back, we're going to talk about your Greece experience.
Yeah, I can't wait to tell you about the things that I feel I can share publicly, because I hang out with Burning Man people doing Burning Man life. Bum, bum. Bye, everybody.
Hey friends, before you go, just one more thing. If you enjoy this podcast, you get value out of it, you enjoy listening, please share this podcast, comment below. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. Please share it with friends and family. We don't spend any money on marketing or advertising. And so the only way people find out about this podcast is from you. So please do everything you can to share it with friends and fellow colleagues in the fitness industry. We love making it and we want to keep doing it for a long, long time. So I appreciate your support. Go have a kick-ass day. Bye.